Everyone needs to stop underestimating Charles Oliveira. Recently, the UFC announced that Charles Oliveira vs Arman Tsarukyan is booked for UFC 300. And although Oliveira was probably going to get the next title shot, it seems that Islam is out with an injury and he's not going to fight again until the summer. And in the meanwhile, Charles Oliveira is going to be going up against Arman Tsarukyan, and the winner of this matchup will undoubtedly get the next title shot. But the early sentiment from a lot of fans and the early betting odds seem to suggest that Arman Tsarukyan is the favorite for this matchup, which in my opinion doesn't make all that much sense, and I think people need to stop underestimating Charles Oliveira. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Charles Oliveira has had a very interesting UFC career so far. At the beginning of his UFC career, he was known as a guy that was very average. He was able to beat some guys, he lost to some guys, but overall there wasn't anything all that special about his game. But after going on an incredibly long winning streak, Oliveira has been nothing but incredible. Oliveira was able to beat top-tier fighters on his run like Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, and even Kevin Lee. But probably the most impressive thing about the run that Oliveira went on was he was not only able to beat these higher level fighters, but he was also able to look phenomenal while doing so and getting a finish in each one of those fights that I mentioned. And during that incredible run, Charles Oliveira started to become one of the bigger stars in the entire UFC. And the reason why fans were gravitating towards this guy was due to a couple different factors. The first factor was his fighting style. He was an incredibly entertaining guy. He was able to get finishes in a ton of different ways, and it just seemed like his fights never really got out of the first or second round. But another reason for why fans gravitated towards Oliveira was due to his story and due to his personality. Oliveira just seemed like an extremely respectful and an extremely nice guy that was easy to get behind, but also when you heard about his story about where he came from and how he got to the point where he's at today, it was just a very easy story to get behind, and that was definitely another reason for why a lot of people started to gravitate towards Charles Oliveira. But the last reason for why, in my opinion at least, Charles Oliveira became so famous and became such a big star in the UFC is due to the Underdog Story. When you look at a lot of those fights that Oliveira was in, whether you talk about the Justin Gaethje fight, whether you talk about the Dustin Poirier fight, the Michael Chandler fight, and a lot of other those fights as well, Charles was actually the underdog in most of those fights. And although the odds makers and although a lot of fans didn't think Oliveira would be able to win a lot of those fights, he ended up winning all of them. And I think the real underdog story of Charles Oliveira was another reason for why a lot of fans gravitated towards him. But unfortunately, after becoming a pretty big star in the UFC and after having a ton of wins under his belt in a row, Oliveira's next matchup was going to be up against Islam Makhachev. And of course, we all know at this point, Oliveira ended up getting finished by Islam in the second round via submission. And after Charles lost that fight, it seemed like all of those people that didn't believe in Oliveira before started to come out of the woodworks once again. As some people were even starting to say that Charles's career was over, that he wouldn't be able to keep this up for all that much longer, and maybe it would be time to think about retiring not too long in the distant future. But regardless of the devastating loss against Islam Makhachev, Charles's next matchup was going to be up against Beneil Dariush. And once again, going into that fight, Charles Oliveira was actually the underdog. But as we all know at this point, Oliveira was absolutely able to run through Dariush and he was able to finish him. And after finishing Dariush in such impressive fashion, it seemed like the UFC and Dana White were gonna push Charles Oliveira to be the next guy to get the title against Islam. And that's actually what was supposed to happen, but unfortunately Oliveira ended up getting injured and had to pull out of that fight not too long before it was scheduled to happen. But regardless of the pullout, it seemed like the UFC was still set on having Oliveira fight next for the title against Islam. But not too long ago, Dana announced that Islam appears to have somewhat of an injury and he's probably going to be out until the summer. And with that being said, it only made sense that Oliveira would then go up against a different fighter, and at this point, the UFC has made the fight between Arman Tsarukyan and Charles Oliveira. And this is definitely a very fun and very interesting fight. But the early sentiment of a lot of fans and the early odds actually show that Arman Tsarukyan is a pretty decent favorite over Charles Oliveira. And in my personal opinion, that doesn't make all that much sense. defense. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is why? Why do I think Charles Oliveira should be the favorite, and why do I think Charles Oliveira will be able to beat Arman Tsarukyan? Well, in my opinion, I think it comes down to a couple different factors, but the first factor that I want to touch upon is how dangerous he is. Charles has the ability to finish you in a lot of different ways. On the feet, Oliveira definitely has the capability to get TKO finishes. As he has tremendous boxing, he's extremely technical with the shots he throws, he has a ton of power in his punches, he has a nice ability to mix things up, whether you talk about throwing kicks, throwing knees, or throwing elbows, and overall throughout the years and throughout the crazy win streak that Oliveira was able to go on, we saw a lot of finishes from Charles on the feet. But even besides that, once the fight gets to the ground, Oliveira is probably even more dangerous, as he's probably the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in the entire UFC, as he's able to submit you in a lot of different ways, and overall when you're on the ground with Charles Oliveira, that's not a place you want to be in, even if you do have top position. But especially if Charles Oliveira has top position, it's almost a nightmare to deal with this guy on the ground. And a huge reason for why I definitely do favor Charles Oliveira in this matchup is due to how dangerous he is overall, no matter where the fight goes. Now, the next reason for why I favor Charles Oliveira over Arman Tsarukyan is due to his experience. Now, when you look at some of the guys that Oliveira was able to fight and able to beat, you talk about guys like Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Beneil Dariush as well, and although he did end up losing to Islam Makhachev, he also gained experience and valuable experience of what improvements he needs to make within his game in that fight. And I do overall think the championship experience that Oliveira has gained and all of those main event and co-main event fights that he's been a part of as of late is actually going to be a huge factor in this matchup against Arman Tsarukyan. And although when you look at Arman's fights throughout his career, he definitely did have a couple of main events, he did go up against a couple of top level guys, he did end up going up against Mateusz Gamrot, which he ended up losing on the scorecards, but me and most other people think he probably should have won that fight. He did finish Beneil Dariush in very impressive fashion. He did also go up against Islam Makhachev when they were both earlier on into their careers, and he also definitely does have experience as well, but I just don't think it's the same level of experience that Charles Oliveira has. Now, overall, I definitely don't think this is a very one-sided fight. I don't think Arman Tsarukyan has no chance to win this fight. I think he obviously has proven the ability to have a ton of power in his hands. The way he was able to finish Beneil Dariush was just crazy to see, and based upon that, there definitely is a concern that if he's able to land on Charles Oliveira, he can knock him out. Of course, that definitely is a very real possibility, but at the same time, I just feel that Charles Oliveira has more paths to victory as opposed to what Arman Tsarukyan can do. I think if Arman's gonna win, he's gonna win via a TKO finish. Against other guys, I definitely think Arman can win in different ways. He could win by decision, but against Charles Oliveira, I just don't really see it. On the feet, Oliveira is clearly the more technical striker out of the two guys, and if Arman isn't able to land a huge shot and knock Charles out or knock him down and hurt him significantly, I just don't really see him having the ability and capability to win via decision. I think at the end of the day, as the fight does progress, Oliveira is going to start to find his shots and he's going to start to land pretty effectively on Arman. And even though on the ground, Arman definitely has a really nice ground game, I at the same time think Oliveira's submission ability and his overall jiu-jitsu ability is going to make it very difficult for Arman to have all that much success really wherever the fight goes. So overall, although I think this fight could go either way, at the end of the day, I definitely do favor Charles Oliveira. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Charles Oliveira should be the favorite in this matchup against Arman Tsarukyan, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.